Welcome back to our series of videos on converting AD&D 2nd Edition products to 5th Edition D&D. If you haven't already, you may want to go back and watch this video's predecessor. It covers in depth how to convert 2E ability scores, races, and classes into 5E. This video, like that one, will have timestamps to allow you to use it as a resource. That way you don't have to watch 15 or 20 minutes of video to get to the parts you need to convert what you're doing at the time. If you've seen that one already, then you're ready to dive right into what I have in store for you today. In this video, we will go over the mechanics that drive 2nd Edition and how to make adventures and NPCs designed for that rule set work in 5th Edition. I will present non-weapon proficiency, armor class / THAC0, saving throws, movement, and healing rules, and explain how to use 5th Edition mechanics to keep the 2nd Edition flair. But first, I will talk about the different design philosophy of 2E and why overcoming that difference may be the hardest part of reskinning products from that edition into your 5E game. AD&D 2nd Edition, like most old school editions, was designed to be challenging. Adventures from that era were not written to be a walk in the park. If your party survived a module, it had less to do with how mechanically tough their PCs were and more to do with how shrewd the players were. TSR, the publisher of D&D up till 1997, expected their customers came to their game for a challenge. They expected their DMs to keep the pressure on their players. They expected their players to be resourceful and rise to the challenge whenever they could and know when to run when they couldn't. Unfortunately, for you trying to do a conversion, this is not the case with 5th Edition D&D. Everything the PCs need to survive is on their character. They heal and recover abilities much faster than their 2E counterparts. 5E adventures are written in such a way that if the dice don't turn against them and they don't make a major blunder, then the player characters should survive. Both design philosophies have their merits depending on what kind of game you want to play. But your players may not be ready for the culture shock of the old school style of game. There are at least two ways of overcoming this problem. Option number 1. Nerf the 2nd Edition products you're converting. You can effectively do this by keeping everything the same as written. Because 5th Edition player characters are so much harder to kill than the 2nd Edition PCs the adventure was designed for, it should bring the adventure in line with 5E norms for difficulty. This is the easiest way to deal with the deadlier design aesthetic of 2E, but in doing this you are depriving your players of the experience of overcoming long odds and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Option 2. Sit your players down ahead of time and let them know what is coming. Tell them that they will have to be on their game to survive the next adventure, and that if they think an encounter is about to go south, that running is a completely viable option. Tell them they are about to take the game to a whole new level, and even characters that die will live on in the songs and legends of the group for decades to come. After that, give them the option to opt out. If they choose to opt out, see option number 1 above. If they say they're up for the challenge, then increase the number of opponents or their damage per attack. Increase the number of encounters in a day, or don't give the party as much opportunity to take rests and recover their health and abilities. This last option of reducing the party's opportunity for rest is probably your best one. I will explain 2E healing later in this video. This should give you an idea of how much you need to beef up encounters and traps to have their intended effect on your player characters. Let's move on now to the rules of 2nd Edition. We can start with the proficiency rules. First of all, there are two kinds of proficiencies in standard 2nd Edition AD&D. There are weapon proficiencies, which I already covered in the section converting fighters in the last video, and non-weapon proficiencies. Non-weapon proficiencies are in some way similar to the skills used in 5th Edition. They use an ability score check with a modifier to determine success or failure. Here is the list of non-weapon proficiencies from the 2nd Edition Player's Handbook Revised, shown on Table 37. I'll now give you an example of how non-weapon proficiencies are used. Say a wizard with a 16 intelligence wants to try to see if he can recall some obscure piece of ancient history that will help his party answer a riddle correctly. This wizard has already spent the slot to have the ancient history non-weapon proficiency, so his player rolls an ancient history proficiency check. As you can see, the relevant ability for that proficiency is intelligence with a modifier of -1. What this means is for the wizard to succeed, he must roll under his intelligence -1. So he needs a 15 or less to succeed. As a note, the column marked number of slots required shows the number of non-weapon proficiency slots that must be spent to acquire a particular non-weapon proficiency. Just like weapon proficiencies, non-weapon proficiencies have a certain number of slots that are given out at character creation and every few levels after that, depending on character class. The number that each class starts out with and the speed that they pick up more is shown on Table 32 in the 2nd edition revised Player's Handbook. Now that you have some idea of how non-weapon proficiencies work, here's how I would convert them to 5e. Just use the skill rules. If the NPC has a non-weapon proficiency that there is already a skill for, just substitute that skill. If there is no such skill, make one up. Use the relevant ability from the old non-weapon proficiency as the ability associated with the new skill you are introducing to 5e. With the non-weapon proficiencies tackled, let's talk about the 2nd edition to hit number system, the much dreaded THAC0. First of all, you have nothing to fear when it comes to understanding and converting THAC0 and descending armor class into 5th edition. The two systems are mirror images of one another. Here's a quick and dirty rundown of how descending armor class and THAC0 work. First, if you don't already, you'll need to know what the acronym THAC0 stands for. It stands for 2 Hit Armor Class 0, the O being 0. Now you're going to need to know a little bit about descending armor class. In both AD&D 1st and 2nd edition, armor class started out as 10, just like in 5th edition. Technically, you could have a worse armor class, but a 10 represented someone in street clothes who wasn't overly quick or slow. Things such as being tied up, being asleep, being knocked out, being blinded, and others could tack on negative modifiers to armor class, pushing it higher than 10. So 10 is the starting point for a normal person without magic or armor protecting them from attack. As a character donned armor, their armor class dropped. For the most part, the armor was worth the same amount now as it was then. You were just subtracting instead of adding to the armor class. So leather armor is worth 2, making the 2e armor class 8. Chainmail armor is worth 5, making someone wearing it armor class 5. To get down to 0, the equivalent of a 20 armor class in 5th edition, you would need full plate mail plus a shield, barring magical or dexterity bonuses, of course. So going back to THAC0, a character or monster's THAC0 is the number they need to roll equal to or greater than to hit the previously discussed opponent wearing full plate mail and carrying a shield. So what if the thing being attacked doesn't have a 0 armor class? That's easy. If the armor class of the opponent is a positive number, subtract it from the attacker's THAC0 to figure the hit number. What if it's a negative number? 2e armor classes can go as low as -10, which is equal to a 30 armor class in 5th edition. The answer to that is easy too. You still subtract the armor class from the THAC0. How do you subtract a negative number from a positive number? Think back to 2nd grade. That's right, you add the absolute value of the negative number. Now let me give you a few examples of how this works. I'll start with a 3rd level fighter attacking another fighter in chainmail. The 3rd level fighter in this example will not be strong enough to receive any pluses to hit from sheer strength, so his THAC0 will be an 18. He is using a longsword, a weapon he is proficient with, and his opponent's armor class is a 5 because he's wearing chainmail. This means that our 3rd level fighter will need to roll a 13 or better to hit his opponent. 18 minus 5 equals 13. Now say that same 3rd level fighter is going up against the big bad who rules an entire nation with fear. His opponent has full plate mail and a shield. His shield has a +2 magic bonus, and the opponent has high dexterity, granting another +2 bonus. This means that his armor class is -4. So what does that make our 3rd level fighter's to hit number? 18 minus -4, which is the same as 18 plus 4, equals 22. Even though it is impossible to roll a 22 on a d20, just like in 5th edition, 20 always hits. So with our 3rd level fighter, his to hit number is the same for any armor class of -2 or less. That to hit number is a 20. To determine what a character's THAC0 is, consult Table 53 from the revised 2nd edition Player's Handbook. As you can see, each class group improves their THAC0 at a different rate, warriors being the fastest and wizards being the slowest. Use this table to find the character's class and level. This gives you their unmodified THAC0. In 2nd edition, as in every edition of D&D, there are many situational modifiers. The strength of the character, whether or not they are familiar with the weapon they are using, whether or not the weapon is magical, and many other factors can add to or subtract from the character's THAC-O. Monsters' THAC-Os are given in their description. I will cover converting 2nd edition monsters in the next video in this series. For more information on THAC-O and all the things that can affect it, as well as the fastest way to use it in-game, you can watch a pair of videos I made a couple of years ago. I have put the link to them in the video description below. Okay, now that you have a grasp of how Descending Armor Class and THAC-O work, how do you convert them to 5th edition Armor Class and to hit number? Easy. For the Armor Class, take the 2E number and subtract it from 10, then add that to 10, and that gives you the 5E AC. Here's an example. The opponent in Chainmail we talked about a few minutes ago has a 2E AC of 5. So to convert that, 10 minus 5 equals 5. Now add that back to 10 and you get your 5E AC. 10 plus 5 equals 15. So a 2nd edition AC of 5 equals a 5th edition AC of 15. Let's try that again with the Big Bad's AC. He had an armor class of -4. 10 minus -4 is the same as 10 plus 4, so that equals 14. Now add that back to 10 to get the 5E AC. 10 plus 14 equals 24. So the Big Bad would have a 24 AC if he were converted to 5th edition. As for the 2-hit modifier, just find the difference between the NPC you are trying to convert's THAC-O and 20. With our 3rd edition fighter, that would be a 2. 20 minus 18 equals 2. Take that 2 and use it as a weapons proficiency bonus modifier, and add it in with any other modifiers that add up to the NPC's attack bonus. It's that simple. Having armor class and THAC-O covered, we're now ready to get into saving throws. What are now called saving throws were in 2E called ability checks. AD&D saving throws were a way for the rules to deal with otherwise hard to categorize things that a PC, NPC, or item might need to react to or resist. These categories were set up in the days when much of the gameplay for D&D took place in dungeons and caves, and it shows. The categories are as follows: save versus poison, paralyzation or death magic, petrification or polymorph, rod, staff or wand, spell, and finally breath weapon. Each of these categories were meant to cover more than just the few things mentioned in their name. For instance, a save versus breath weapon may be called for if an attack that covered a large area and came rushing in from one direction happened. This could be a blast of wind carrying shards of glass, or a swarm of flying insects bursting into a room. If the character or monster could make their save versus breath weapon, then they had dove out of the way or behind cover and taken half or no damage, depending on what the situation called for. All other saves were set up the same way. They all covered a wide range of possible dangers that could be avoided or resisted. It is probably best if you just drop this part of any NPC you try to convert and substitute the 5E save system instead. 5th edition lacks the nuance for you to try to plug the 2E save system into it. Now we can go on to movement. Converting movement is really simple. Standard movement for a size M creature in 5E is 30 feet in a 6-second round, while in 2E a 60-second round allows for a 12 movement rate. This amount is given in tens of yards, so it's actually 360 feet. It's just a little faster than the 300 feet a minute of 5E. That doesn't matter when converting PC races though. If it's a human, elf, or half-elf that you're converting, their 2nd edition stats will say they have a 12 movement rate. When you see that, just convert them to 30 feet around to bring them in line with the 5th edition rules. The smaller races like dwarves, halflings, and gnomes were handled a little different in 2E. They moved at half the speed of their taller friends, having a 6 movement rate. Once again, just bring them up to 5th edition standard. They should have a 25 speed. When you are converting something that is not a standard player character race, then just multiply the movement rate given by 2.5 to get the 5E speed. For instance, a creature with a 20 movement rate in 2nd edition would have a 50 speed in 5th edition. Okay, in this section of the video I'm going to talk about a subject that has to do more with converting the 2nd edition adventure modules themselves than individual NPCs or monsters. Here I'm going to touch on encounter strength and why you might find some combat encounters a little weak for the level of the party the adventure is written for. First, I must explain the difference in healing between the editions and how that affects the way the old modules were designed. Unlike 5th edition, where not only can a PC heal themselves of dozens of hit points of damage just by sitting down and taking it easy for an hour, but many of the healing abilities the party members may have can also be reset. In 2E, healing is much harder to come by. If a character who didn't have a super high constitution, who had, let's say, 32 hit points when fully healthy, got stabbed for 8 hit points by an enemy with a bastard sword, it was a big deal. If he were out on campaign and had no priest to heal him, it could take him 8 days to heal his wounds completely, and that's provided he got plenty of food and water and was able to get a good night's sleep each night. Under those circumstances, he would heal 1 hit point a day. If he could get bed rest, for every day he spent in bed, he would heal 3 hit points a day. This could be increased to 5 or 6 hit points a day depending on dice rolls, if he were also attended to by someone with both the healing and herbalism non-weapon proficiencies. Because of this, older modules might need to have their combat encounters beefed up a little to make them more challenging for 5th edition characters who heal like Wolverine by comparison. One other thing to take into consideration when converting combat encounters: most monsters in 2E had multiple attacks in a round. The standard attack routine of a normal monster was claw, claw, bite. This meant that more damage was dished out and more characters could be hit by a smaller number of monsters. Both of these differences mean that using 5E rules would make many 2E adventure encounters laughably easy. Now that brings us to the last section of this video, which is about magic. I've already covered how magic is categorized in the last video when I talked about wizards and priests, so I'll only briefly touch on it here. The main thing I'll be explaining here is the difference between 2nd edition cantrips and their 5th edition counterparts. I'll make only one comment on converting them, and that is, you will have to add cantrips to any spellcaster you convert to 5e, because the term means something completely different in 2e. Now that we have the how to convert 2nd edition cantrips to 5e, let's go back and cover the differences in the way magic was handled. In 2e, each spellcasting class had a table, like Table 21 shown here, that told how many spells of what level a caster could memorize or pray up in a day at any particular level. Unlike the slot system, spells were the level they were listed as and could not be bumped up to a higher level by dumping slots on them. In this way, the 2nd edition spellcasting system was more rigid. For more information about spellcasting in 2nd edition, you can watch my video on this subject. I will leave a link for it in the description below. Finally, we come to the last thing I will cover in this video: 2nd edition cantrips. As you can see here, in 2nd edition, cantrip wasn't its own level of spell, it was just another 1st level spell. Here you see the spell description in the 2nd edition revised player's handbook. It basically says that a 2e cantrip isn't good for much beyond practicing spell casting and impressing children and yokels. It is explicitly not useful in combat. I will leave this up for a few seconds more so you can read it through. Now you understand why you won't find cantrip on the spell lists of many 2nd edition NPCs, and why you will need to add them when you are converting spellcasters from 2nd edition to 5th edition. Well, that's all I've got for this video. I hope you found it helpful. The next video in this series will be about converting the thousands of monsters from AD&D 2nd edition for use in your 5th edition game. It will be out next week. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. If you like what I do on this channel, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss my upcoming videos. If you would like to help me make this channel better, you can leave a comment. I would love to hear what you think. If you would like to support this channel and Dark House Rules Games Design Studio, you can pledge your support on my Subscribestar page, link in the video description below. In return, you will get all manner of gaming accessories. I hope you have a great day, Happy gaming. I'll see you next week in the Monsters Conversion video.